I'm implementing the sacred reading into the talk. I'm just going to make it all one this morning. Because it's a little story about an atheist who was out fishing in Scotland, Wales-ish area. And all of a sudden this huge dragon, like amphibious-looking thing, leaped out of the water and had these snarling teeth, and it moved closer to the atheist, and he screamed, "Dear God, please save me." And all of a sudden everything stopped. And the heavens opened up, and this very deep voice asked, "I thought you didn't believe in me." And the atheist said, "Give me a break. Until 2 minutes ago, I didn't believe in the Loch Ness Monster." Yes, beliefs change. So we're taught in metaphysical teachings to focus on what we want more of and not what we don't want, and to use our language to craft that experience very carefully. For example, instead of affirming, "I don't want to drink anymore," the affirmation is, "I make healthier choices to relieve my stress." See the flip? And instead of affirming, "I release my anxiety right now," instead of owning the anxiety, it's more like, "In all moments, I am safe and at peace." Isn't that nice how they do that? I just kind of tweak it. And so there's a story that I read recently that illustrates this really well, this sort of, what are we putting out and what do we want to experience? There was a man in a restaurant, and his attention was drawn to this woman who had this big white sweatshirt on with huge black bold letters that said pornography across it. He was a little stunned. But as he looked closer, in teeny tiny red letters right up here, it said, "Is not the will of God." This big. So he observed that what she was advertising was what she didn't want. And in order to see what she did want, people had to stare at her breasts. I think Alanis Morissette would call that ironic, if she knew what that meant. Okay, so it's kind of confusing. It's when we're out there saying stuff, but it's what we don't want, and the universe is going, "I'm sorry, you want that." And what we do want is being whispered in teeny little letters. And so there are more extreme examples, such as in politics and religion, mostly politics and religion, that people say they want smaller government, and yet what they're really interested in is who can and can't get married and what women do with their bodies, which is actually very micromanaged government. So not to get too political, but I am going to get there today. Or those who claim that they value the sanctity of all life and yet will bomb a clinic or kill a doctor. It's a very mixed message. What are you for? What are you against? What are you really speaking out for? And so those are very glaring examples, and it can be super confusing, and it makes us ask, what is the point? What are you actually supporting, and what are you actually going against? And a friend and I were chatting about this on Facebook when I posted the talk, and he likes to argue with me. And so he was saying, well, there's some things you've just got to be against. You just got to be against them. And his argument was, well, aren't you against child abuse? Well, of course I'm against child abuse. It's a horrible and inconceivable, incomprehensible act of violence against innocent people. And I get that. My point is today, though, for me, it's more empowering to speak of what I am for than what I'm against. So I'm for the safety and protection of children. I'm for the care and welfare of children, as opposed to I am against child abuse. What am I speaking out into the universe? Yes? It's really semantic, and I get that. And I gave in to my friend. I'm like, yeah, it's semantic, it's woo-woo, whatever you want to call it. However, it's what I'm believing to be true. And so I believe that words have power. And so things aren't just semantic. it's my response, and it's so much more. It comes from so much of a deeper place, and I know I'm not alone in that. And a beautiful example of this that I can turn to somebody with a little bit more clout than me is Mother Teresa. A group of people approached Mother Teresa and asked her to speak at an anti-war rally, and she refused. And they were stunned. They were like, "Why don't you want to speak?" And she said, "If you'd asked me to speak at a pro-peace rally, I would have shown up. But I'm not against anything. I'm for love." Awesome. So it's not that she's for war. She's just more for peace. And she doesn't want to show up somewhere that's anti-anything. So I love that. And it's simple and it's really clear. And when people hear that, they go, "Oh, I see what you're saying." So every day in our lives, we are asked to be for or against something or someone. From the mundane conversations about what TV shows you like or what kind of foods you like, all the way up to the president and world events. You know, the very obvious and actual literal elephant in the room is last week's elections. It was very confusing. And confusing is also the political strategy of many countries who, in their strategy, will support a country, like one country will support another country militarily, only to discover years later they're being attacked by the very country that they militarized and gave weapons to. Where does this all go? It's happening right now, and it's very serious. And so that's like the global reach. But let's bring it back to the personal. So have you ever aligned yourself with somebody, or like a coworker or a friend, and in social circles or in work, and you've unconditionally supported and defended this person all the way, and you feel like they're the one, they're the team that you want to back, and you find out, somehow you find out that they're not exactly in integrity, that you stood by them and maybe they were actually using you to get your job, or to steal something from you, or to hurt you in some way. I mean, it happens. People use phrases like, "you backed the wrong team," you know, when you get stuck in those situations. And just a little departure from that. So I was commenting earlier, I was playing a little Yusuf, formerly known as Cat Stevens, before the service, and there's been a lot of that "you backed the wrong team" around him. And I just find it so interesting. None of us know him, and yet we're all freely arguing about him on Facebook, about what he said or didn't say, and what did he mean, and how did he mean it, and when he said it. And it's so funny, because none of us actually know, but there's a lot of discussion about it. Anyway, so it's this idea of you back the wrong team. So I'm going to go there with the sports analogy, because I can. It's so much fun. So I used to go to Aces games, Aces hockey games, and I used to be a real annoyance to all those sitting around me, because I participate in something called spiritual sportsmanship. Spiritual sportsmanship looks like this. If two teams didn't show up, we'd be watching practice. Agreed? And who wants to pay a lot of money to go watch the Aces practice? So two teams have to be there. So can we be grateful that the other team came? Thank you for showing up. And so, rather than be bored, we can be thrilled that the other team is playing. Here's another one. They're playing with our team. They're not playing against our team. Everyone's playing together on the same ice. They're playing with each other. And so I'll cheer when anybody gets a goal, because I just think it's remarkable. I mean, you watch them on the skates going 80,000 miles an hour chasing this little black thing. If they can hit that into the net, they get my praise, because it's remarkable. It's so awesome. And the only time that I will get riled up and become against is if anybody's playing dirty. I don't like dirty play, and I don't like fighting. Because if I wanted to watch fighting, which I never do, I would watch boxing, which I never do. Because fighting like that makes me nauseous. And who wants to be nauseous? So skating really fast and backwards and chasing a little black thing across the ice is using a skill that I absolutely don't have, which is why I want to contact Skate to Greatness and see if they'll take me in. I want to do that. I'm for excitement. I'm for the game. I'm for the skill. I'm for the goal. And I'm totally for the food because there's really good food at Aces Games. It's really awesome. Don't listen. It's really good. So I don't go to hockey games to be against something. Well, I don't go anymore anyway. But I didn't go to be against something. I went to be for. I went for fun. And so there's also what I thought was really telling. There's this ritual at the game. And when the other team has a player that has done something naughty and they get sent to the penalty box, I call it the meditation chamber, for them to go sit and think about what they've done and reflect. When they come back to the game, the announcer yells, such and such team is at full strength. And the Aces fans all yell, and they still suck. Not very sportsmanly. What I find funny is when the other team is beating us like 8-0, and they yell, and they still suck, I'm like, obviously they don't suck, because they're kicking our butts. So that part I lost on me. It's ridiculous. So on the other side of this yelling and they still suck thing is Bill O'Reilly, a gentleman who is on a certain news channel, which shall remain nameless, is a very outspoken gentleman about his views, and he is right about everything, according to him. And he and Jon Stewart from The Daily Show have this really great friendship. I think they refer to it as a bromance. They have this very, very good bantering friendship. And Bill O'Reilly often comes onto The Daily Show, which I just find really disturbing to my soul. But to get past that. So, John has him on and they do their little bantering thing, and John lets Bill have his egomaniacal ramps and his pomposity and stuff as, Bill bobs and weaves to avoid John's wit and burning questions that actually he never actually answers. And it's really something to see. And even though I don't like when Bill O'Reilly is on the show, one thing that really amazes me is when he comes onto the stage, when Jon Stewart announces Bill O'Reilly and he comes walking onto the stage, no one in the audience boos. There's never a boo, there's never a harassing catcall, nothing. I'm fairly certain they're coached to not do that. However, coached or not, it's nice that they don't. Because I don't think it works the other way. And so I like that his audience is, all right, we'll give you this. John wants to talk to you, we'll give you some space. And yet what's really cool is when Jon Stewart does make a point and gets through things, they will cheer. They will, give him a boost and cheer. So it's nice that they're coached not to be rude, and it's nice that they're allowed to celebrate their moments. So basically what that looks like to me is it's an experience of for only and no against. Like there's no negative energy around it. There's only for energy. There's only happy energy. And we're looking for that, right? We're going for the for. So it's like, think about how you feel when you participate in a rally or a protest or a march or whatever it is that's celebrating something. To revel in those moments for. We're changing something, we're fixing something, we're lifting something up. I walked in the very first New York AIDS walk in 1985, 86, and it was phenomenal. It was the first AIDS walk in the country, and it was like this empowering, AIDS was such a horrible thing, and yet we were walking together, and we were raising money, and we were setting a trend that was going to spread across the country. It was so exciting. Or when we rode a motorcycle in the Boise Pride Parade. Let me just say, I was actually impressed with the size of the Boise Pride Parade, but it was this like, in this state of red, this little island of blue, people were celebrating. And there was no anger. Or like even when this past week, my news feed on Facebook, I voted. Everybody, get out the vote. Do you need a ride to the polls? I'll come get you. There was this like surge of we're going to do things. We're going to, and it's exciting. And it's so empowering, and we feel like a family, and we feel like a community, and we feel like we're doing something for the good. And so there's a really high vibrational energy around that. And then think about the vibrational energy about when you're fighting against something, fighting against injustice, gatherings that are angry or hostile, or like they feel like they're on the edge of exploding into a riot. It's a very low vibrational energy. It's a very rumbling, dangerous vibrational energy. And so that's what we're talking about with for or against, is what vibration do you want to live in? We want to live in the high vibration or the low vibration? And so the question is, can I be for a cause or something without being against something else? Like, can I be in this for good energy without slipping down into this ucky energy? And so I think so. I think we can be for peace, and we can be for ceasefires, and we can be for marriage equality and women's rights to medical privacy and making space for people to come to this country for opportunity. And yes, even guns. We can be for certain things if we understand what we're wanting. Being for something means that we understand what we want to experience, as opposed to being against something, which tends to look a lot like this. I don't like it, I don't understand it, I'm against it. I don't want to see it or know anything about it. Like, who are the politicians that have changed their stance on marriage equality? People with kids who've come out, people who've talked to people who have met the folks putting their lives on the line with lawsuits. These are the people who've said, oh, boom, oh, there's more than just me in the world. Oh, there's other things going on here. I need to be for something instead of, I don't understand it, so I'm just going to be against it. When we have human encounters, even people that I disagree with, when I can sit down with them or talk with them, it's like I hear where they're at and go, that's why you're against it. Okay, so let's try to reframe it to be for something else. There was a moment in Ferguson, Missouri. I just read about this recently. This moment is so beautiful. There's this woman in the community of Ferguson who's doing a lot of peace work within the community. And she was carrying a sign that said, hands up, don't shoot. And she saw this police officer, and she approached him carefully, and she said, why do you hate us so much? And he said, I don't hate you. And they had this moment, and she said, is it all right if I hug you? And he said, yeah. And instead of one of those superficial hug, pat, 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 let's do it for the cameras, this hug lasted over a minute of the two of them just embracing. And it was this weird moment of balance, of understanding, where for and against suddenly came to, oh, right there. And unfortunately, it didn't stop moments that were happening after it. However, it does show us something. There's something that can happen here. When we are for something, there's good, positive healing. And once you're in that space, it's really challenging to then be against stuff. Because we already know there's no other, right? So it's just me and you. There's no other. So once I'm moving into that high vibration of for, it's really hard for me to keep slipping back into, oh yeah, well, I'm for all those things. I'm still against that. Okay, so that sounds very nice and very frou-frou and peace, love, and all that stuff. And then there's ISIL, or Daesh, or ISIS, whatever we want to call it. And my guess, here's my guess. If we were to sit down with people from ISIL and ask them what their purpose, their goal, their reason for doing what they're doing is, my suspicion is that their argument for what they're doing is going to sound a lot like what America's argument has been for doing a lot of things over the years. And it's a dangerous thing to say, and yet we know it. We know it. Those of us who are awake know that that's what's happening here. The methods look a lot different. I don't think we would do what they're doing. I'm not going to go there. However, there have been times in history where the good guys have done things that have been like, whoa, I thought we were the good guys. And so there's always a motivation, there's always a reason, there's always a purpose. They think they're being for something. We're seeing them and we think they're against us. And so this is where another spot where that like tug of war gets sticky. After September 11th, 2001, I held a very quiet opinion about what was happening. Because I really felt and understood that what happened in 2001 on September 11th was not an unprovoked attack. That America wasn't innocently sitting here singing peace, love, and then we were attacked. And so to speak out about that was very dangerous at that time, if you remember. We all had to be for America, period, unconditional. And if you were not completely, 100% for America, you had the risk of being shunned or hurt or worse. In April of 2003, as we were pulled into a war in Iraq that we have later found out shouldn't have been, there were a couple of women down in Kenai, actually Soldotna, older women. They were Quakers, and they were standing on the corner of the Sterling Highway, and they were holding up signs that said, "Consider the children." That's all they were saying. These women weren't speaking. They weren't yelling and hollering and jumping. They were standing quietly, holding signs that said, "Consider the children." And a man drove by intentionally. This is April of 2003. Intentionally dumped buckets of ice-cold water on these women. When he was arrested, his friends and community paid his bail and supported him unconditionally. And he said that he had done it before and he would proudly do it again because he was for America. These women were standing up for peace. They were standing up for children and for the innocent people of a country that we had attacked. And this man stood against them using patriotism and cold water to show how right he was. And he had the support of his community. These women bravely stayed silent. They would not speak against him. They chose silence and they chose forgiveness. And to me, they are the strongest and most courageous women that I know, because that was huge. They held to what they were for instead of being against anything that was happening around them. Now, none of this is easy, and I know that. And again, it's not black and white. It's not right or wrong. It's not for or against. It's very blurry. You know, in the days after the election, I was reeling from the appearance of what was happening all over the country. And that showed up on Facebook a bit. And one of my dearest friends sent me an offline message that said, and I quote, "I've noticed that when it comes to politics, you tend to lose your meet in the middle love side." Just saying. Love you. Ow! That was like such an ouch. You know, here's me talking about Rumi's field and out beyond wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field, let's meet there, except when it comes to politics. You know, it's like I made this like little caveat of, there's no for or against, except when I'm right. You know, it's like, what? Where am I going with that? You know, and so I totally owned it. I said, you know what, you are right. I realize that there are topics and there are issues and there are areas where I stop being who I want to be for a minute. And all of us, we all have work to do. We all have things we need to do. And so I found this Ram Dass quote, and I posted it like right away and gave her credit. And it's, I would like my life to be a statement of love and compassion. And where it isn't, that's where my work lies. And it reminded me of this like fascinating discussion I was involved with recently about religion. And the main focus of the conversation was, should we proudly talk about and share our faith, which was the perspective of those in the conversation who are strong Christians, or is it how we live our message of faith that becomes our life? And that was my perspective. And what was awesome is the conversation remained respectful, yet passionate and honest. And it was lovely to see all of us be standing for what we believed without standing against each other. Like we could each speak, well, I believe da-da-da-da-da, and the next person would say, I believe da-da-da-da-da. And the next person, and it was never, you're wrong, you're stupid, my beliefs are better. It was all, oh, interesting. Oh, that's a new perspective. I didn't think about that. The way I see it is, and it was like 4. It was like a Jenga tower of 4. It was great. And I thought that's Rumi's field. That's where Rumi's field is. Where it's like, I believe this, and let's have a picnic. We're going to just be there. And that's the moment, those are the moments that are so, so awesome. So, clearly with other topics like religion and politics and military interventions and personal issues that are close to us and who we are and how we live, it's really easy to allow our passion to become our position. And even I had to take a moment when Spirit typed those words. It's easy to allow our passion to become our position. Because it's this idea of, can we be passionately for without getting stuck in a position that is against? That's the spot. That's the spot. And then I remembered Emerson. And this is what's really true. What I need to be aware of, I say we, but really I'm going to just speak for myself. Who I am speaks so loudly that others can't hear what I'm saying. I need to be what I want to see in the world. I need to be for what I want to see in the world and not worry about what I'm against. And so obviously there's a lot to say on this, and this was actually the edited version of my talk. It started out 40 minutes long, so be grateful. But there were 2 things that I just wanted to share right at the end here. And one was that those who celebrate and walk the Hindu path last week, 2 weeks ago, celebrated the holiday of Diwali. And it's also known as the Festival of Lights. And it's an ancient Hindu festival that's celebrated in autumn, and it celebrates the victory of light over darkness, knowledge over ignorance, good over evil, and hope over despair. And I thought, how timely for all of us right now. How timely in this country for all of us right now as we move into a sort of wonky, uncertain political future. And I say this to myself as much as I say it for you. This is our time to move from darkness to light, from despair into hope, within ourselves, in our community, in our country, in our world. This is our time to be for what we want as opposed to be against anything. And lastly, I'd like to close with Bill Hicks. Bill Hicks was an amazing comedian who bordered on being a preacher. He was like a comedian, but he definitely, his mother even said, she's like, oh, he's a preacher. And he said some really dangerous and awesome stuff on stage. And he was raucous and he was fearless and he was way ahead of his time, and he's missed on this planet greatly. And this was one of his pearls of wisdoms. He said, I'm glad mushrooms are against the law because I took them one time. And you know what happened to me? I laid in a field of green grass for 4 hours going, my God, I love everything. Yeah, now if that isn't a hazard to our country, how are we going to keep building nuclear weapons? You know what I mean? What's going to happen to the arms industry when we realize that we are all one? From a comedian. Love, Bill Hicks. So let's take this to prayer. Oh, goodness. So much. So let's just take a minute to breathe to breathe. It's so easy to get caught up in the largeness of everything, to think of everything as this large problem to be solved, or issues to be resolved, or things to face. So let's bring it back to the personal. Let's take it back just to ourselves. It's just us and our stone and our quiet moment. What is it in us, within each of us, that we are for, and what is it within us that we are against? I encourage anyone who is here now, here in consciousness, and who eventually listens to this talk, I encourage all of us to explore what it is within us that we're pushing up against. What's keeping us from living the life that we want to live? What's keeping us from getting to that high vibration? What is it? And I encourage each of us, once we know what it is, to not run and hide from it, to not tuck it away in the back of some closet in our house, to not say next week I'll deal with it, but just to take a moment to look at it. I found most often that the moments in my life when I've had difficulties with another person, I found that when I sit down with that person and see them, we can get past anything. And so it is with each one of us. Whatever it is within us is calling out for love. Because truthfully, as we live, there's love and there's everything else. And so when we reach that place of saying, all right, I'm going to love this thing that's pushing up against me. I'm going to love this thing that's keeping me from raising up to that high vibration. I'm going to surround it. I'm going to give it all the love I can. That's when the shift happens. And whether it's a story that we're carrying, whether it's a belief that we're carrying, even if that belief has insurmountable evidence, I encourage each of us to challenge that evidence, to challenge the beliefs that we are against anything, and to flip it, and to find what we're for. To be for peace, for love, for reconciliation, for possibility, for change. And most especially for knowing that we can't know what's on the other side of what's happening now. So even in those moments where it seems like this can't possibly be good, we don't know that. So let's be for possibility. Let's be for knowing that it's good and that we just haven't seen it yet. And that good is coming right now. It's happening. And I encourage each of us to be there for each other. So when we're in that place where we're really not sure, just know that there's somebody else holding you up. That's what we do. That's what community does. That's what Spirit Stone is for. That's what all truly love-based, faith-based communities are for, is to lift up, to be for love and good and possibility. Let's know that today. Amen. Thank you. Thank you. Amen. Ashe.